And there I encountered God in the Eucharist and in confession like I never had. And I remember this one day where I went to confession, this one day where we had adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. I remember turning to kind of the friend I'd come with. There were 100 students from my university. We all took a 16-hour bus to Orlando from Austin. But this one friend, Patrick, I remember looking at him saying, I think I will look back on this day as maybe the most transformative day of my life.
Welcome to God's Call, My Faith Journey. Today we're joined by a young man who's been living in Ireland for nearly a decade, working as a missionary. But today he's going to share with us a little bit just about his own personal faith and how it is so important in his life, the ups and downs where God is in it all. It's great to have with us in studio Sean Flack. Sean, thanks so much for being with us.
It's great to be here.
So you're originally from Texas, or
great state.
the great state of Texas. So did you grow up in a kind of a Christian family, a Catholic family? What was it like when you were growing up?
So we went to Mass on Sunday. Mom took us all. Dad came most of the time. Faith was definitely a part of our life. I think like many in my generation, though, the dots weren't necessarily connected.
It was just kind of, this is what we do. Rather than...
And I knew it was important and it meant something to
Yeah.
me. But it didn't become personal really until high school, secondary school.
Yeah, like a living faith, you know. Sometimes, yeah, we can just be kind of almost going through the motions, or even when it is a living faith, that we're just, it's so part of your
Well,
routine.
I think that experience of turning 14, 15, 16 and I don't know how to say it other than sin, and starting to see friends start to partake, or me start to partake in various life and activity of things that I knew were wrong. And it wasn't just a moral thing that this is wrong, this is right, but I knew there was a deeper reality, that there must be more. If God is real, I must be invited to something more than this. But there weren't people around me voicing that, so I didn't know who to follow. It was Jesus. I didn't know how to follow, because, yeah, you're kind of the only one at 15, 16. Or there were maybe many of us, but it's hard to go against the tide when everyone's going one direction.
Yeah, especially when, when you're a teenager and you're going through so many different changes in so many ways, the last thing you want to do is to stick out, right? So what happened for you in high school then, that you tried to rail against all the peer pressure that's on you to do so many things that ultimately don't bring you happiness?
Yeah, I remember my first week of high school. I was invited to a youth group, a Protestant youth group of sorts. And they all seemed to be good, fun people going, so I could go. And it was mostly fun and games, 50 minutes. In the last 10 minutes, we sang one song about Jesus. But it was a lovely, simple song. And then this guy came up and he talked for about 10 minutes about Jesus. But he talked about him like he knew him. And I am sure I had heard wonderful homilies for, the first 14 years of my life. I'm sure I had good religion teachers when I had gone to a Catholic primary school. But this was the first time that the dots were connected. Like, oh, this is really personal. It's not just a religiosity of showing up, but it's actually deep and dynamic and personal. And I remember getting a lift home and being in the car. I'm 14 years old, and I'm now at a public high school. America has a different system, so there's no religion a part of school whatsoever anymore. And it was different. I'd been at a Catholic school prior. I'm 14, and I think, okay, I could find a way to get out of this whole God thing. I could find a way to be at a friend's house Saturday night and not be home Sunday morning. I could. And I remember making this in the backseat of this car, thinking, I think I want to do this God thing.
Yeah.
I want to know more. That was the first real moment of decision as a young adult I can remember.
It's amazing that the impact of just one person's sharing their relationship with God can have, and even on kind of a young teenager, which I think should give people confidence themselves
Absolutely.
to share their faith and talk about their faith. But still, you're still like 14. You have a long road ahead.
Hmm.
What happened next? How did your faith kind of grow from there?
So I would say, yeah, as high school continued, I continued to go to that youth group. That was very impactful. I remember a couple years later in high school, I decided that I wanted to start reading the Bible. So I started reading the Gospels most days, and that was very impactful. I do, though, later on realize there also was a great desire to be known as being good. So it wasn't always, it's different, it's still not always, it wasn't always pure.
Yeah.
Um, there was this desire to be good, but even more to be known as good. And maybe in Texas, in Texas in 2008 or 9, there's still a Christian environment of sorts, and it's
No different here in Orange. Like you had to be seen at Sunday Mass, and it was
yeah,
kind of ticking that box rather than actually engaging with what was happening.
totally. So there was this element of being good, but there were real encounters with God and reading the scriptures. And I remember very profound moments of praying for things. And I remember praying that God would remove things if He wanted to remove something from my life that would keep me from Him. And very tangible things would happen that week. And so I had these encounters of prayer. But then it was in college, go to college, big, amazing secular university. And my roommate, I didn't know him, and he chose to become Catholic. So he wasn't Catholic, and he's going through RCIA to become Catholic, and he starts teaching me everything about the faith I grew up in. And that was when it changed, because now I feel like in a whole new way I had this brother in Christ. We had so much fun socially, but then we connected on a faith level. So I remember we read the whole New Testament for Lent. So we lined it up, how we're going to do this over 40 days, and we read the whole New Testament. And we're chatting, I mean, individually, but we're chatting about it. And then he starts teaching me how to pray the rosary. To me, that was what we did in Catholic school in the month of May and in the month of October. And I don't do that anywhere outside
Yeah,
of that.
that was it.
And he's teaching me, but he's not just teaching me, okay, well, there's 3 or 4 prayers, that's fine. But I'm meditating on the mysteries. I didn't really know I didn't really know the mysteries. I didn't know the invitation to meditate on the mysteries. So now I'm thinking about the life of Christ every day, meditating upon the mysteries of the rosary. And this is changing something in me. College goes on, and I had many, many wonderful, faithful Christian friends, Protestant and Catholic. But really, I wasn't too involved at the Catholic Center at my university, and most of my friends were all Protestant. Um, But I started to notice that I did believe something different from him. There were differences that I started to be like, well, that there is a weight to Holy Communion when I'm there at Mass that is different from what you speak of. And there is, I do believe in confession. I don't even know, I've just barely been going back to confession as my roommate's becoming Catholic, but I'm like, but I actually believe there's grace here. So I started to realize these differences, and then really, it was my 3rd year of college. A girlfriend of a lot of years broke up with me, and then a couple of roommates um, um, really are kind of walking away from the faith. And I say,
Why was it at that time just a kind of college environment, or was
yeah,
there a
it's a good question. Um, I don't know. I can't. I don't know the answer to
yeah,
that.
there's not a pinpoint.
But everything hit the fan then,
Yeah,
and
everything was falling apart.
everything.
You're in that moment where you're going, "What is going on?"
100%.
Yeah.
And my faith is becoming more real for me. But then, and I don't demean suffering. Many people experience way deeper suffering than a breakup
It
or,
was
or
your
friends.
suffering, though.
But
It's still your reality.
it was a real suffering.
Yeah.
And I remember this plea to God. I remember the little duplex we were living in there in Austin, and my roommates actually were all gone. And I'm like pleading to God, crying, and just in pain about life. I feel alone. I feel like college has been so fun and amazing socially, and I've grown so much in my faith, and I have these amazing brothers around me, and now I feel alone.
Yeah.
And then it was then that I had, I only really had 2 really Catholic friends, like really, really were involved in their Catholic faith. All my other friends present. I called, and 2 of them had kept inviting me to this Catholic conference, maybe 100 times. And I told them 100 times why I couldn't go. And then I call one of them, I call Anthony and I say, "Hey, is it too late to sign up?" And he said, "No, there's still spots." So I signed up. So January of 2013, I go to a conference that Focus, the organization I now work for, puts on. And there were about 7,000 college students there in Orlando, Florida. Catholic student, or Catholic conference. And there I encountered God in the Eucharist and in confession like I never had. And I remember this one day where I went to confession, this one day where we had adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. And I remember turning to kind of the friend I'd come with. There were 100 students from my university. We all took a 16-hour bus to Orlando from Austin. But this one friend, Patrick, I remember looking at him saying, "I think I will look back on this day as maybe the most transformative day of my life."
Wow.
And I think about it all the time because there was a new encounter with God. And what I would say then was, now God was like real. Like he was real before, but there is something amazing in the sacraments. He's tangible. Like
Yeah.
I tasted and seen, and I had this felt experience. And then absolution after confession, it was it it was spiritual. It and it was physical. It was all real. And I would say, I mean, I'll keep going, but from there is when my faith went to a whole nother level.
Yeah. But in that moment, that experience, and there's a few things there. It's the saying yes eventually, but as well for the friends who kept asking
Hmm.
you to go to
Oh
a
yeah.
particular event because they kept knocking on the door. Well, God kept knocking on the door to you through them.
Hmm.
Um, but how does that jump to then? Okay, you go to this amazing conference that Focus organized. You work for them now. When did that then turn into? I think I want to be a missionary for these guys.
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's say it's about 9 months later, I'm starting my final year of college, and that same friend who invited me 100 times to that conference, he's kind of mentoring me. He's been practicing his Catholic faith for a long time. And he says, "I think you should consider being a missionary." And I said, "Yeah, no way would I do that." And then I find myself filling out an application. And I'm going to this recruitment weekend. And then I leave this weekend of interviews and talks about life of missionary. And I'm going, holy cow, I think I'm supposed to do this. And I'm kind of stunned. Like, it's kind of this like, this Peter Parker or this Clark Kent, this superhero, like, always in the movie, they try to not do it.
Yeah.
They're like, they try for, 10 minutes to not be Spider-Man. Like they're going to ignore it, but they can't. That was the experience. Like, no, can I just not,
Yeah.
can I just believe that
Yeah.
that's not real,
It's
that's
not me,
not the
it's someone else.
invitation? And it was so clear it was.
Yeah.
So I got a call 3 days later and they invited me to be a missionary. You initially make a 2-year commitment. So a few days later, I had said yes and made a 2-year commitment and served as a missionary for 3 years in America. Kept discerning yes, and then they invited me to Ireland in 2017. So I said yes to that. So what changed was, I would say, that encounter with our Lord in the Eucharist and confession. Then this opening came. Well, I have so many friends. I'm down in South Texas, here in Ireland, who are Catholic, who don't know anything about their Catholic faith. Yeah, I want everyone to know this, but they grew up like me. They were there on Sunday and they just don't know. And that was when I would say the zeal for souls came, that they have to know. I have to tell them this is real, because this is one of the things that you can ask all of our missionaries that I work with. And I was just last night talking to I got to give a talk to a bunch of students at UCD. And what I have a hard time with, the gospel is for everyone, but there's so much of this, what I would consider low-hanging fruit. These people who are just waiting for one invitation. There's so many people who have experienced so much pain in this life and bad example by others, and they're going to need a lot of love and a lot of sharing of the faith and a lot of encounter. And there's so many others that need one invitation, like me. So that's what changed. I said, Yeah, I want to go do this for others."
Yeah, well, thank you so much just for sharing with us a little bit of your own story and your own faith, Sean. It's been lovely to hear. And do you know what? With that last kind of thought, maybe as it comes into Easter, someone might have the courage to invite a friend to something that's happening in their local park or their local church, or yeah, to encourage someone else to be the one to ask to give the invitation, or someone who might be listening who's going to accept the invitation. So
Mhm.
I think that's perhaps what God wants us to get out of from your sharing of your own testimony. So thanks so much for being
You're
with us
welcome.
today.